In this pre-algebra video, we're going to be reviewing and practicing all the main ideas of Chapter 2. Throughout this video, I'm also going to show you a couple slides from some of the informative slides of some of your past notes from Chapter 2. It's important that when going through this video, you take the time to try these examples to the best of your ability first, and then check yourself. Now, if you get stuck on a question, even after trying it, looking at your notes and your examples, you still don't quite understand, then yeah, of course, listen to the help for that question. Regardless, make sure you check the correct answers to every single question. Make sure you have the correct answers for every single question in this review, and correct any mistakes you have and learn from your mistakes and maybe study some similar questions. Alright, let's get this thing started. The main ideas of Chapter 2 are these are the sections we did. Section 1 was all about rational coefficients. Section 1 was all about what to do when your coefficient is a fraction or a decimal, how to separate that fraction coefficient or decimal coefficient from your variable. And you always do that by dividing. We talked about, in Section 2, we talked about two-step equations, meaning getting the letter by itself but having two things that we need to move to the other side. And in this section, we discussed some other stuff, and I'll review it when we get to it. In Section 3, we talked about writing two-step equations of our own. We did some basic just translating questions, but then we actually started learning how to do actual word problems and practicing writing equations to model those word problems. Section 5, that section was all about multi-step equations, meaning we had to first use the distributive property to get rid of parentheses, we combine like terms. So now that we've simplified both sides of the equation, then we were ready to solve it just like these equations, the sections above it. So using those skills. Alright, so let's get this thing started with question number 1. Remember, try these questions before you watch the answers. Okay, so before we talk about rational coefficients, let's make sure we do a brief review of what they are and what we need to do. This is straight from your notes in your video from that section. This is an example of why you should have your notes out. Anyways, if you're dividing your coefficient away, which you can technically do because this always works, here's what you need to know. We separate all coefficients from their variable by division. Meaning, I'm going to write an example down here. If you had 3x, we wanted to move 3 away from the x. We want to separate them. Well, when they're touching like this, that means multiply. So the opposite is always going to be divide. So we would divide both sides by 3. Now, even if it was a scary fraction, like 2/3 x, you're going to have to divide to get that away from it. So you're going to divide both sides by 2/3. And then on the next line, you'll figure out how to divide. And you'll see that in these coming up examples. Anyways, I think I just gave away the second step, was just apply how to divide by a fraction. Once you simplify, you're all done. Alright, let's get some of these questions done. If you have not done so already, make sure you try question number 1 first. Hit pause and give it a shot if you haven't done so already. Alright, so we learned when solving and getting any coefficient away from its variable, does not matter if it's a decimal, if it's a fraction, if it's a number, you divide to move a coefficient away from its variable. And as a reminder, that's because when they touch, that means multiply. And the opposite of multiply will always be dividing. So that's why you always divide to get rid of any coefficient. Anyways, divide both sides by 1/12. Now, once you do that, you just remember how to divide by a fraction. The right side is v, but now on the left side, how to divide by a fraction? Well, that 6 needs to be a fraction, so we're going to put it 6/1. Now remember, how to divide by a fraction? You multiply by the reciprocal, meaning flip it. We took the 1/12 and we flipped it. That's what we did. And that 1/12 became 12/1. So once you have 12/1, now you just multiply straight across like you would with any fractions. If you were able to use a shortcut, go ahead and use it, but in this case, there was no opportunity for the shortcut. 6 times 12 is 72. On the bottom, 1 times 1 is 1, so we just have 72. So v equals 72 is the solution to this equation. Alright, question number 2. Hit pause and try that one if you haven't done so already. Okay, remember you divide to get rid of coefficients. So in this case, the coefficient that we're getting rid of is negative 2/3. So you divide both sides by negative 2/3. They cancel on the left side, and you're left with just w. Now on the right side, you just need to review how to divide by a fraction. That's 60. We need it to be a fraction, so 60/1. Now, how to divide by a fraction? You multiply by the reciprocal of that fraction. So it's negative 3/2 is what we're multiplying by. And I suggest if you can use your shortcut, you use it. And there's a video on the YouTube channel that I put up on rational operations. It's called Rational Operations Multiplying and Dividing. I go over very in depth how to do the fraction shortcut. So when multiplying fractions, if you want to learn the shortcut in depth, maybe you need more than just this example, check it out. All right, so the 2 and the 60 simplify. It happens to be that 2 goes into both of them. 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 60 30 times. So now we're ready to multiply. Going straight across. Well, before we do anything, a positive times a negative, regardless, this is a positive and this is a negative. Positive times a negative is always a negative. So I'm going to write W equals negative. We know it's going to be negative. Don't overthink it. 30 times 3 is 90 on top, and on bottom 1 times 1 is 1. So we're just left with W equals negative 90. And that's our final answer to number 2. All right, question number 3. You divide both sides to get rid of that coefficient, so let's get that done. Divide by 7 over 8. Divide by negative 7 over 8 since it's negative. Now, pay attention. You have a negative divided by a negative. So use your perspective. The answer is going to be positive. So you already know it's going to become a positive answer. So at this point, you honestly can just ignore the negative. It's going to become a positive. But I'll go ahead and write it in my next step anyways, just as a reminder. So you have negative 21 over 1 times negative 8 over 7. You're going to want to use the cross-canceling shortcut. 7 goes into 7 once, 7 goes into 21 3 times. Now, we already said we know it's going to be a negative times negative is a positive, so it's a positive answer, so I'm not going to write any negative. 3 times 8 is 24, and on bottom, 1 times 1 is 1, so we're left with K equals 24. That's our final answer to number 3. Now, question number 4, we have our first decimal coefficient, but the answer is it doesn't matter. To get rid of any coefficient, you always divide. So if we're getting rid of 1.2, we're going to divide by 1.2. Hit pause if you haven't done so already. Make sure you solve this. The calculator is your friend, so I've got no problem with you doing that. So the right side is just B, and the left side, figure out what is 9.6 divided by 1.2. And it equals 8. So B equals 8. And we said, boy, it's a positive divided by a positive, so we know it's 8. So look, very few steps for you to do with decimals. Just make sure you show your work right here, that step of dividing both sides by 1.2. All right, take a moment to try number 5, number 6 if you haven't done so already. Hit pause if you need to do these. Okay, just like the last question, to get rid of a decimal coefficient, you can use the division sign or you can use a fraction bar. This means the same thing. I don't care which one you use. It's up to you. I tend to use the division sign because it's more obvious. Anyways, those cancel, and we're left with A equals, now just figure out what is negative 9 divided by 0.75. So 9 divided by 0.75. That gives us 12. It's a negative divided by a positive, so it is negative 12. That was our final answer to number 5. Try number 6 if you haven't done so already. It's a coefficient. We get rid of all coefficients by dividing. So negative 15.9 divided by negative 15.9. Now, they cancel on the left side. The right side. So on the right side, we have just remaining n over there. On the left side, we have a negative divided by a positive. Well, a negative divided by a positive, that is a negative. Now with your calculator, what is that equal when you divide those? And it equals 26. And we knew it was going to be negative. We don't need the calculator to tell us it's going to be negative. So it's going to be negative 26. And that's your final answer to number 6. Okay, in each of these questions, we still have a coefficient to get rid of. Hit pause and try these, but if not, you haven't hit it so far, I'll give you a hint. Question number 7, turn this into an improper fraction first. Turn this into an improper fraction. You need all your fractions to be no mixed numbers, at least improper fractions. So turn number 8, turn that into a proper fraction. Then you'll be ready to go. Hit pause and try these if you haven't done so already. Alright, so if we turn that into a proper fraction, 10 times 3 is 30. 30 plus 1 is 31. So we get 31 over 10. That's what our question currently is. 31 over 10 equals, now let's do it to the other side. 5 times 6 is 30. 30 plus 1 is 31, so we have 31 over 5. So 31 over 5. Now we're ready to get going. So divide both sides by that coefficient. 31 over 10. On the other side as well, divided by 31 over 10. Those cancel. You're left with just S equals. Now on the right side, just remember how to divide by a fraction. 31 over 5 stays. Now, divided by 31 over 10 is multiplied by 10 over 31. Now go ahead and solve from here and you're done. Use cross-canceling. You end up with this. So you get S equals 2 over 1, which is just 2. So S equals 2. That is your final answer to number 7. Hit pause and try number 8 if you haven't done so already. Convert those to improper fractions and you're ready to go. So turn that into an improper fraction over there. Now divide both sides by your coefficient. When you divide both sides by your coefficient, remember they cancel. So on the right side, you're left with just m. Now on your left side, you just have to figure out what is 20 over 9. Remember, you only flip the one you're dividing by. The one you're dividing into stays the same. So we multiply that by negative 5 over 4. A positive divided by negative is a negative, and a positive times a negative is negative, so it's going to be the same answer regardless. So we know the answer is going to be negative. Now, you definitely want to use a cross-canceling shortcut on this. 4 goes into 4 once, 4 goes into 20 5 times. So now up top, we have 5 times 5, well that's 25. And on bottom, we have 9 times 1, that is 9. So we have negative 25 over 9. That is an improper fraction. Now, for your final answer, turn your final answers into mixed numbers. So, it's still going to be negative though, but 9 goes into 25, 2 times, and so that puts us at 18. That's a remainder of 7. So 2 and 7 ninths, and we said that was going to be negative. So negative 2 and 7 ninths, that equals m. That is your final answer to number 8. Make sure you have these steps. Alright, let's try these. Turn these into improper fractions, then you're ready to go. So all I've done is turn them into improper fractions. Now you're ready to divide both sides. Then when you divide by, you flip and it becomes multiplying. I'm going to show those steps. Remember how to divide by a fraction. You flip it and it becomes multiply. So now solve this and you'll be done. A negative divided by a negative is a positive, so use the cross-canceling shortcut. We end up with 4 over 5, and we say we know it's positive. 4 over 5 does not simplify, so that's our final answer. N equals 4 over 5. So now we're going to do some word problems. We're going to translate these into equations, and we're going to solve them. So our job is to find a variable, write, and solve an equation. The Parker family drove. Actually, with word problems, I'm going to remind you, I like to read the last sentence because the last sentence tells us what we're looking for. So it says, how many miles did the Parker family drive on the first day? Okay, so that means that actually what we're looking for, how many miles on the first day, I'm going to make that our variable. I'm going to choose m for miles. And so m is going to stand for the number of miles driven on first day. Driven on the first day. Driven on first day. Okay, now that we've defined our variable, now we're ready to go. The question says the Parker family drove a total of 180 miles. So that means something happened and we were left with 180 miles. Something happened because you have a total. Now it says this distance is 1.5 times the distance they drove on the first day. Well, 1.5 times, that should be a clue. That means 1.5 times what they drove on the first day. Well, we don't know what they drove on the first day, but we named that m. We said m is what they drove on the first day. So that means 1.5 times m. 1.5 times n. And 1.5 times m is just 1.5 m, touching. So 1.5 times m equals 180. That's our equation for this problem. So now solve it just like we've been doing, and you'll have your answer for how many miles they drove on the first day. So divide both sides by that coefficient with your calculator and solve. We end up with m equals 120, so that means they drove 120 miles on first day, on their first day, on the first day. So that's what that means. Be able to translate your answers into words. While that's stopping, I'm going to fix that. Let's do another one. Make sure you try these on your own first before you watch the answers. I'm going to read the last sentence anyways. It says, if you answered 16 questions correctly, how many questions were on the language arts quiz? Meaning, we're looking for the total number of questions. That's what that's saying, because that's how many are on the quiz. So I'm going to call it Q for questions. So Q is going to equal the number of total questions on the quiz. I'm just going to say number of total questions. That's our variable. So now let's go through. It says Jose correctly answered 80% of the questions on the language arts quiz. 80% of, a fraction of, or 80% of. Anytime we say a fraction of or a percent of, we're almost 100% talking about multiplying. Well, 80% as a decimal is 0.80. And I just said we're talking about multiplying, so we're going to multiply that by of the language arts quiz. Well, that's all the questions. Well, all the questions is Q, the total number of questions. So 1.80 times, not T, Q, that's going to equal how many he did, how many he answered. And it says that was 16. So total is 16. So that means 80% of the total number of questions is 16, meaning 16 was a piece of the whole, and the whole is Q, meaning all the questions. So our equation is 0.80 times Q equals 16. Solve this like you do any decimal or rational or any coefficient questions, separating it from the variable, and you're done. Calculator's your friend for the decimals. we end up with Q equals 20, meaning there were 20 total questions on this quiz. Put that into words and you're done. Alright, this is the last word problem and the last question for section 1. It's all about financial literacy. It says Demetrius deposited 60% of his paycheck into a savings account. What was the amount of his paycheck? So we don't know the amount of his paycheck, so that's what we're looking for. So that means his paycheck, we can call it P if you like. So P equals amount of paycheck. I'm going to abbreviate amounts. Amount of paycheck, meaning how much did he get paid? So the question says he deposits 60% of that. We just got done saying a fraction of something or a percent of something means multiply. So 0 times 60, 0.60 is what I meant to say. 0.60 times our variable. Our variable is P. That will equal how much he deposited. Because it says they're saying 6% of his paycheck. 60% of his paycheck. That means a piece of his paycheck. Well, if you look at the graph to the right in your question, it says that was $41.67. So it was given information, it just wasn't in the word problem, happened to be in the visual. So how much he deposited was $41.67. Well, we found out $41.67, that is 0.6. That is 60% of his paycheck. So this is your equation. Solve this and you'll be done. By the way, these last two questions should sound very familiar, like our percent stuff that we learned last year in chapter 7, I believe it was. So in this example, or chapter 6 it may have been. And so in this example, we're just simply solving for the whole. We know the piece, we know the percentage, we're just looking for the whole, meaning what did all of it come out of. So solve this like anything, divide both sides, and you'll be done. We know P equals 69.45. That means his paycheck was $69.45. That was his total paycheck. That's what that means. Make sure you can interpret it back into the question. I'm going to rewrite that. Lesson 2 is all about solving two-step equations. And as a reminder, this was your objective that you need to remember. It says I can solve two-step equations because I will apply inverse operations and the order of operations in reverse. Meaning inverse operations is how you move something to the other side of the equal sign. Order of operations is reverse, meaning that's what order you should move things away from the variable. And in other words, start with what's furthest away from your variable in most cases and work your way closer and closer. Let's do some examples. Make sure you hit pause and try these examples first before seeing the answers. Make sure you give them a shot. Okay, so the thing that's furthest away from A is -7, but also minusing comes later than multiplying. Remember, when they're touching, that means multiply. Minusing comes later in the order of operations. So because of that, that's the first thing we move. And the way we move it is with the inverse operation, meaning the opposite of -7 is +7. So those cancel. And on the right side, we're left with 4A. On the left side, we have 5 plus 7. Well, 5 plus 7 is 12. So now you have 12 equals 4 times A. So to finish from here, you have to get rid of this coefficient. Remember, like we said earlier, all coefficients touching mean multiply, and the opposite of multiply will always be divide. I'm just using a fraction bar just to show you have options. So those cancel. We have A equals 12 divided by 4. Well, that's 3. That's our final answer. A equals 3 to this equation. Whenever you're in doubt, plug that back in. So as a reminder, if you were to put 3 here, you'd have 4 times 3, that's 12. You'd have 12 minus 7. Well, 12 minus 7 is 5, so you'd have 5 equals 5 on the left side. That's a true statement, so it definitely checks out. So don't be shy to plug your answers back in. Excuse me. Try number 2 if you haven't done so already. Hit pause. We're going to move that -9 first by doing the opposite. So on the right side, only 5x is remaining over there. On the left side, 16 plus 9. Well, that's 25. Now you're left with 25 equals 5x. I did not write these very neatly. So divide both sides by that coefficient, and you're done. You end up with x equals 5. Now, it occurs to me, I forgot to do what I did last time. I'm going to start showing you the answers first before showing you how to do them, because that way the point of this is to check yourself. You don't necessarily have to watch this whole video. So you only need to watch the answers to things that you are getting wrong, or things that you're not really sure if you're confident how you got the answer. Maybe you guessed, maybe you weren't sure how to show your steps. But regardless, check your answer, and then if you have it correct, you don't really need to listen to the explanation unless you really want to, but then look at the steps. Make sure that your steps are neat and organized like mine will be. Or if you get it wrong, then you need to take the time to maybe try it again, and then confirm and look at the video, look at the steps. If you're still confused, make sure you have it done correctly. Just make sure on your paper you have all work shown and the answers. So let me start by writing the answers. Hit pause and try 3 and 4, or just 3, and then I'll show the work for it. Okay, so number 3 is c equals negative 4. So if you need help on how to do number 3, watch this next part. Otherwise, you can fast forward over the next few seconds. And try number 4 if you're in that position. In this case, 3 is furthest away from c, so we're going to move 3 to the other side. 3, there's nothing in front of it, so it's assumed to be positive. So the opposite of a positive, meaning if you're moving the entire term, anytime you move an entire term, like 3 or negative 8c or positive 35, anytime you move an entire term, you're going to do it by doing the opposite of what it is, meaning adding or subtracting. If it's positive, you subtract it. If it's negative or if it's minus, you add it. Anyways, minus 3 from both sides. And if you do that, on the left side, this is important. That's not just 8c, that's negative 8c. So on the left side, we have negative 8c equals, and on the right side, we have 32. So now you just have a one step remaining. So divide both sides by that coefficient. I'm using a fraction bar just for funsies. It doesn't matter which way you do it. So that cancels. So on the left side, you're left with c equals, a positive divided by a negative is a negative. 32 divided by 8 is 4. So the answer is c equals negative 4. That's our final answer to number 3. Okay, number 4. Let's write that answer down. Number 4 is at 8. X equals 8. So if you got that right, great. Just make sure you have the right steps. If you got it wrong, then make sure you listen to this explanation. Got to get rid of minus 7 first because minus 7 is furthest away from x, and also because minusing comes after multiplying in the order of operations, and we're doing things in reverse. Remember that. The opposite of minus 7 is plus 7. Be careful with your negative skills. On the left side, we have negative 1/2 x. Now on the right side, if you have a negative and you're adding, or even if you don't have a negative, it doesn't matter. Whenever you add, that means on the number line, you go to the right. Well, if you start in the negatives, because remember the first one tells you where to start, if you start in the negatives and you add, that means you're heading toward, meaning pretend you had a hole that was 11 feet deep. You're now going to put 7 feet of dirt back into it, so it's no longer going to be 11 feet deep. You're going to be heading towards 0. It is still going to be a hole, so you're still going to be negative, but you're heading towards 0, so you're going to be at negative 4. So that means x equals negative 4. You're going to have still 4 feet deep. So negative 4. Now from here, just like solving the rational coefficient. So refer back to the first part of the video on how to do that if you're not sure. So when you divide by a fraction, you got to flip it and multiply. Remember, you only flip the one you're dividing by. Now simplify and you're done. A negative divided by a negative, or negative times a negative, equals a positive. So it's positive 8. That's your final answer. Okay, take a moment to try number 5 and number 6, at least number 5, and hit pause and try it before I show you the answer. Alright, so the W ends up equaling negative 52. So watch the explanation if you need it, or at least make sure you have the correct steps. Make sure you check your answers. Gotta start by moving that 15 out of there, and that's also because it's positive and the opposite is negative, and it's furthest away from W. It cancels, so on the left side you're left with, notice that's a minus sign, so it's negative W divided by 4. So negative W, I don't know what I just wrote, negative W divided by 4 equals 28 minus 15, well that's 13. Now I want to point out, if your fraction is negative, that means either W is negative or 4 was negative. But truthfully, it doesn't matter which one you make negative. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend that it's the 4 that's negative. It doesn't matter if it really is or really isn't. It doesn't matter. The point is you're going to get that negative out of there because you're going to do the opposite. The opposite divided by negative 4 is times by negative 4. So if we multiply both sides by negative 4, times negative 4, times negative 4, if we do that, the negative 4's on the left side cancel because that's divided by negative 4 and times negative 4 on the same side. And by the way, normally I would have written that next to it, but I didn't think to leave myself room to write it over here. That's where I would have normally written it. Anyways, those cancel out, and on the left side you're left with just W. Now on the right side you have a positive times a negative, well that's a negative. And then 4 times 13, well that's 40 plus 12, that's 52. So negative 52, that's your final answer for number 5. Alright, try number 6, you haven't done so already. Number 6, x equals negative 2. So now let's see those steps, if you need them. The opposite of that negative 3 out front is positive 3, so that means add 3 to both sides. So if we do that, on the left side, remaining with negative 6x. On the right side, 9 plus 3 is 12. So you have one step remaining. I get rid of that negative 6 coefficient, divide both sides by negative 6. A positive divided by a negative is a negative, so we're going to end up with x equals negative 2. That's our final answer to number 6. Make sure you have those steps. Okay, we got some word problems. Okay, so Lorena received a $50 gift card to an online store. She wants to purchase some bracelets that cost $8 each. There will be a $10 overnight delivery fee, so solve the following equation. And just so you know where this equation came from, if there's a $10 overnight delivery fee, she's only paying that once because they're going to put everything in one package. So that delivery fee only happens once. That's why there's nothing being multiplied by it. It's just plus 10. It only happens once. Whereas these $8 each, that means $8 per bracelet, meaning the number of bracelets times their $8 a piece will equal how much money she's paying for bracelets. And it says she has $50 to spend, so all of that needs to add up to $50, because that's what we're looking for. So solve this equation, and we'll have our answer for the number of bracelets she can purchase, that she can afford. Start by moving plus 10 to the other side, so the opposite is minus 10. I'm going to use theirs, by the way. I'm not going to rewrite it. So if you do that, you'll be left with 8n equals 40. Now divide both sides by 8, and you're done, because that's the coefficient. That's how you get rid of coefficients. Notice I haven't taken the time to cancel anything out in this question. Sorry if that's confusing. So 40 equals 8. 40 divided by 8 equals 5. So n equals 5. So that means she can afford 5 bracelets. That's the answer. Try number 8 by hitting pause and giving it a shot. Then I'll show you the answer. Then I'll explain it. Alright, the answer number 8 is 15 rounds. That's how many rounds of golf. So 15 rounds. So now to see that explanation, watch it. Otherwise, you can skip it across. Just make sure you have the correct steps. Now, they gave us the equation, so the word problem is a bit, and for these questions, was a bit of a distraction if you have the equation, but I want to make sure you understand where these equations come from. Tasha paid $75 to join a summer golf program. That's like a registration fee. You only pay that once, but it adds to your cost. So because it only happens once, you don't multiply by anything, but it's plus, so plus 75. The course where she plays charges $30 per round, meaning $30 for every round. So we don't know how many rounds she's going to play. It says since she's a student, she receives a $10 discount per round. So she's not paying $30 per round. She's paying 30 minus 10. So she's paying $20 per round. And so that's what that tells us. So that's where the 20 came from right here. $20 times the number of rounds that she plays. If Latasha spent $375, use the equation to find how many rounds of golf she played. Meaning grand total, she spent $375. That's $20 per game plus $75 registration for the golf program. And now we're ready to find out how many games did she play. So solve this just like you would any two-step equation. Let's get that plus 75 out of there. So we end up with Q equals 15. Since we were looking for the number of rounds of golf, we say 15 rounds of golf. That's how many she played. Just like that. Okay, we're out of the word problems for now. We're going to take a look at a question where we're going to solve 2 steps, but it's going to look slightly different. We've got to get rid of this divided by 5, that big old fraction bar. Oops, sorry about that. We've got to get rid of that divided by 5, and then we're going to have to get rid of that minus 4. But here's what I want you to realize. Up top, we have some assumed grouping symbols, because notice it's all of that divided by 5. 5's underneath all of it. So pretend there's parentheses, and so if that's the case, you're going to have to do what's outside of the parentheses first before you can even get to the A inside. So we're going to get rid of divided by 5 first. Well, the opposite of divided by 5 is times by 5. So you're going to multiply both sides by 5. The times 5 and divided by 5 cancel on the left side. So on the left side, we have just A minus 4. Notice I'm explaining this. We're not giving you the answer first. Now on the right side, 12 times 5, well, that's 60. So now we just have to get rid of minus 4 by adding 4 to both sides, and then we'll be all done. So we end up with A equals 64. So that is our final answer to number 9, A equals 64. Now I'll show you the answer number 10 first, but hit pause and try number 10 first. Alright, N equals negative 35. So watch the steps and make sure you have the correct steps if you need them. Gotta get rid of divided by 8 first. The opposite of that is multiplied by 8. So multiply both sides by 8. So on the left side we have n plus 3. Right side, negative 4 times 8. That's negative 32. Now I'll just move that plus 3 to the other side and you're all done. Remember, when you subtract, you go left. If you're already in the negatives, you go deeper into the negatives. So we get negative 35. That's our final answer. N equals negative 35. Now try number 11 and hit pause if you haven't done so already. Z ends up equaling negative 26. Now watch it if you need the steps for it. Gotta get rid of that divided by 10 first. Multiply both sides by 10. If you multiply both sides by 10, you're left with just 6 plus Z equals negative 20. Now to finish solving for Z, we have to get rid of this positive 6. So the opposite of positive 6 is negative 6, or subtract 6. So those cancel, and on the left side we have just z. On the right side, negative 20 minus 6, that means go deeper into the negatives, that's negative 26. That's your final answer to number 11. Take a moment to try number 12. Hit pause if you haven't done so already. Give number 12 a shot. The answer ended up being 140 square feet. But now hit watch this next bar if you need an explanation of why. Make sure you have all the steps shown. Alright, the question says, if Mr. Arendt wants to put new carpeting in the room shown, how many square feet should he order? All we know is that it's rectangular shaped. We don't really know if it's a square or not, so let's assume it's a rectangle. The area of a rectangle, remember, is length times width. So length to multiply by the width. That'll tell us the area of this rectangle. But here's the thing. We have expressions for both of those. So we need to know what C is. But here's the good news. The length is 5 plus 3C, but we're also told up here the length is 14 feet. So that gives us an equation. That tells us that 5 plus 3C equals 14. So 5 plus 3C equals 14. That now tells us, look, we have an equation. We can solve for C. Once we know what C is, we can plug it in over here. We can plug it in over here. And then we'll be able to find the length and the width. Then we'll just have to multiply them together, and we'll be all done. Let's find what 14 is first, though. Turns out that C equals 3, for the reasons we learned in solving two-step equations. Now that you know what C is, plug it in for the length and the width, and we'll be ready to find out what is our length and the width, or our area, because we'll multiply them together. So if we plug in 3, 3 times 3 over here is 9. 5 plus 9 is 14. So the length is 14 feet. Oh, hey, we already knew that. Didn't need to check that one. Let's do the same thing for the width. If we plug in a 3 right here, we'll have 6 times 3. Well, that's 18. Well, 18 minus 8 is 10. So that means our width is 10 feet. So our room is 14 feet by 10 feet. So if the area is length times width, 14 times 10, so 14 times 10, that means 140. So that means our area is 140. We're talking area, so 140 square feet. That's how big this room is. That's how much carpeting you'll need. Alright, we're done with section 2. Now let's look at section 3. Section 3 is all about writing two-step equations. Now, in this section, there were two main skills we talked about. We talked about translating sentences into equations, and here are the steps that I gave you from those notes. Essentially, trim it down to what you need, identify what's missing, and make that your variable. And so then your variable will be a letter somewhere in your equation. Now, some of the general phrases I gave you, some of the words that mean certain things, look at your notes for these. These should look familiar. These are the ones we're going to look for. In general, there are 3 types of questions, and for some reason the list is not here anymore. So number 1 should say just translate. Number 2 should say translate and solve, and number 3 should say something along the lines of with a word problem, like an actual with situations, the context, you're going to translate into an equation and solve. So those are the 3 types. For some reason they didn't show up. Sorry about that. Let's do it. Oh look, there it is. Okay, so now it's all there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do some examples. So in these examples, your job is just to translate. You do not have to do anything else, just translate it. So for each of these, I'm going to try to explain them briefly, and then I'll write the answers for them. Okay, so for number 1, it says 4 less than something. So at some point we're going to have 4 less than something. So at some point we're going to subtract 4. And it says 4 less than 5 times a number. Well, 5 times a number is going to be your variable. Choose any letter you want. So that means 5 times a letter. So 5x, now take 4 away from that, it says all that is equal to 11. So that's your equation for number 1. Number 2, 15 more than. That means plus 15. So we're going to have to do something plus 15. So you could say 15 plus, or you could say something plus 15. The order doesn't matter, because remember, when you add and subtract, when you add specifically, the order does not matter. It's called the associative property of addition. So half a number. That means half times a number. Okay? Or technically a number divided by 2. You could write that too. You could say half times x plus 15, or you could say technically x divided by 2, because technically that's how you find half as well. So all that is 9. So that's our answer for number 2. Now, number 3, 6 less than something, so that means we're going to do something, then we're going to subtract 6. So it says 7 times a number. Well, 7 times a number, that means 7 times your letter. So 7x, now take away 6, it says all of that is equal to negative 20. So that's our equation for number 3. Number 4, 8 more than. Try this one if you haven't done so already. 8 more than means plus 8, 4 times a number. That means 4 times a number. I'll use a different letter for a change. It says all of that is equal to negative 12. So there are your 4 equations to go with these 4 questions. Remember, words like quotient mean divide, words like difference mean subtract, so make sure you keep track of those common words that we had from this list. Now we're going to translate and solve. Our instructions say define a variable, then write and solve an equation for each question. That means there's 3 pieces. You first have to define your variable, write an equation, and solve it. And make sure your answer is in complete context of the question. Alright, so the question says the cost for a certain music plan is $9.99 per year, plus 25 cents per song you download. If you paid that much in a year, find the number of songs you downloaded. Meaning stuff happened, your grand total was equals 113.74. That's what it means. Now, that one-time fee of your music plan, $9.99 per year, that only happened once, and they even said plus, so they gave it away. But the $9.99 only happens once each year, so you are not going to multiply it by anything. You're just going to add it on. So plus $9.99. You could technically do $9.99 plus or something plus $9.99. Anyways, if it says 25 cents per song, that means the number of songs times 25 cents. So 0.25. Oh, never defined a variable. That's an obvious step we need to be doing. So I'm going to call it X for number of songs. I'm not going to choose S because you might think that 5 is an S. It'll look weird having one next to it. Anyways, so this is your equation to model number 5. Now take a moment to solve it like we did in the last section and you'll have your answer. Now get rid of the coefficient. So this means X equals 415. And so you would say he downloaded 415 songs in a year. So remember, your variable was X represented the number of songs you download. You should write that down. And then his final answer was he downloaded 415 songs in this year. Alright, I'm going to give the answer number 6 first, and then we're going to do it together. The answer number 6 is 46.05 meters. That's the answer number 6. Now, to find out why, watch these steps. I totally just said the answer number 7, not number 6. Sorry about that. Number 6, the answer is 10 hours. Now look at these steps if you're not sure where that came from. Okay, so it says Amy has saved $725 for a new guitar and lessons. Her guitar cost $475. Now, I think you'll agree she only bought one guitar. We're assuming to keep it simple. Now, that's going to increase her cost, so we're going to say $475 plus the lessons or the lessons plus $475. So just for consistency, I'll just write the lessons plus $475. So, and it only happens once, so we do not multiply it by anything. That $475 only happens once. So let's continue. It says, and guitar lessons are $25 per hour. And it says determine how many hours of lessons she can afford. Well, if they're $25 per hour, that means $25 times, the number of hours of lessons. So 25 times H for hours. I should have defined my variable. I forgot to again. Define your variable. Make sure you know what you're looking for. That's your letter. Anyways, it says she spent grand total. She saved $725. So that's going to be her grand total because that's going to be how everything she can afford is going to add up to $725. Now, solve this two-step equation, and you'll have your answer. I'm definitely going to squish for space. Alright, I had to move it all over to make room. So now, keep going from there. Divide both sides, you'll be done. H ends up equaling 10. Since we were solving for how many hours she can afford, we would say she can afford 10 hours of lessons. That's the final answer for number 6. Alright, number 7. Take a moment to try this one first. Hit pause and try it, and I'll reveal your answer in just a moment. Oh yeah, that's right. I already said the answer accidentally for number 6. Said it for number 7 during number 6. The answer is 46.05 meters. Now for the reason why, stay tuned. The question says, how tall is the Statue of Liberty? That's what the last sentence says. How tall is the Statue of Liberty? Hey look, I'm going to remember to actually do it this time. So we're going to start by solving for stating our variable. So for how tall she is, I'm going to say h for height. So h for height is going to equal height of Statue of Liberty. Now we're ready to start. Define your variable first. It says, from the ground level to the tip of the torch, the Statue of Liberty and its pedestal are 92.99 meters tall. The pedestal is 0.89 meter of a meter, since it's smaller than 1, taller than the statue. How tall is the Statue of Liberty? Now notice, it does not say 0.89 of the height taller. They're just saying 0.89 meters, meaning the height of we said the h was the height of the Statue of Liberty. Okay, so that means what we're going to do is we're looking for the pedestal. We're going to add it to just the statue. That's what we're going to do. So imagine the total height of just the statue is what we're looking for. So the total height of just the statue is, there's the pedestal, and there's my Statue of Liberty. Oh, this is terrible. I know I believe she's holding the book, but she's got her torch. All right, so the total height. I'm sorry, I gotta stop for a second. All right, so I'm sorry. It cracked me up how terrible this drawing was. All right, so let's give a visual for this question because I think it's confusing. It says the grand total of everything is 92.99 meters tall. So notice that's the statue and the pedestal. That's what I'm trying to get across here. Now, we found out that just the pedestal, I guess I should have done that in blue, just the pedestal, so just this portion, is 0.89 meters taller than the statue. So whatever the statue is, we don't know. That's what we're looking for. Whatever the statue is, plus 0.89. That's the height of the pedestal. So the pedestal has a height of h, meaning the height of the statue, plus 0.89. So literally just like this. This represents the height of the pedestal. The pedestal is taller than the statue, but not by much. Okay, so now add that to the height of the statue. So statue height plus pedestal height. So remember, this was the pedestal height. Add to that the statue height. Well, statue height's just h. That is everything that represents the Statue of Liberty monument, the pedestal and the statue. And we were told in the question that all of that had a grand total of 92.99 meters. So 92.99 meters. So there you go. Sorry for the confusion. That is the equation for number 7, and you're now going to solve that to find just the height of the Statue of Liberty, since that's just the height, just this portion right here, since that's what h stands for. Show your work. Okay, so you have h plus and then parentheses. Now notice, if you have plus in front of this parentheses, that means there's nothing for you to really do, and there's nothing for you to do inside the parentheses, so really, you don't need those parentheses. So those parentheses are just getting in the way. Oh, I got stuff underneath there. Forgot about that. Alright, so those parentheses you don't even need. So we're just going to combine like terms. So like terms, h plus h, well that's 1h plus 1h. Well, 1h plus 1h, that is 2h. So now I'm just going to drop down everything. So we have 2h plus 0.89 equals 92.99. So now your job is to subtract 0.89 from both sides and then divide by 2, and you'll be all done. Do all that, divide by 2, and you'll have your final answer. Everything was in meters, so we say the height of the Statue of Liberty, meaning just this portion, is 46.05 meters. That is the height of just that portion. Sweet. So in case you ever happen to need to know the exact height, you'll be prepared, whether you're going to be building a zip line, a helicopter, or maybe you're doing something. Maybe you're going to kidnap the Statue of Liberty. You know how big of a box to put it in. Take a moment to try number 8. At least think about it. Hit pause and think about it. But I'm going to give you a hint, though. Your hint is, if you don't have to spend all of your money. Most of our questions have had pretty answers where it's gone in evenly. But let's say it's $60 per lesson. Let's say you're adding a lesson. Now all of a sudden you only have like $40 left. That's not enough for a whole private lesson, so you're not allowed to count that partial. You won't say 0.6 or 0.7 of a lesson because there's no such thing. You either get the lesson or you don't. So in that case, you'd have to round down. So for each of these, I'm trying to figure out how many of each type of lesson you can fit. Round down your answers, so since that's the next one you can afford, since that's the most you can afford. You'll just have a little bit of money left over. No big deal. All right, hit pause, give these a shot. All right, so the answer to this question is 2 lessons. She's going to be able to take 2 more semi-private lessons if she chose all semi-private lessons, instead of if she only chose private. So to solve this question, think of it this way. She has saved up $550, but 315 of it is going to be her season pass. So right off the bat, we need to take out that 315. So we'll have $550, take out 315. Now, it occurs to me, we could just write this another way too. We could write this as an equation. All of it's going to equal 550, or no more than 550. So equals 550. That is an ugly 550. Okay, so she's going to have she's going to have a season's pass. That's going to add to her cost. It's only going to happen once. So plus 315. Now what we're going to do is this. We're going to say for private sessions, for private lessons, those are $60 per lesson. So $60 times P. So this equation would represent how many private lessons she could afford. But for both these options, I agree, regardless of what option she was choosing. Like let's say she was just doing all semi-private lessons. Semi-private lessons would look just like the first one, but it would be 45p, and then the rest of it would be exactly the same. Plus 315 equals 550 if she had chosen all semi-private lessons. So if you solve each of these equations, you'll notice they both start by doing the same thing. They both start by subtracting 315 from both sides. And that's what I was about to say intuitively. We know regardless of what she chooses, she's going to have to buy this junior pass. So if you wanted, you could just subtract it right away. So really you're just going to find out what is 235, I believe that's what that equals. What is that equal for each of these? So now, for the first one, do the 235 divided by 60, and that'll tell you how many private lessons she could afford if she chose all private lessons. And then for the next one, do divide both sides by 45, and that'll tell you how much she can afford if she's doing semi-private lessons. Oh, I used the wrong letter I meant to for each of these. Oh no, this is going to get confusing for you if I do not fix this. I am sorry. Here we go. We should be using a different letter since it's a different option. So for semi-private, I'm going to call that... if I call it S, you're going to think that 5, oh goodness, I'll write a really big curvy S. Alright, so that's an S. So that's what I meant to say. Let me adjust that. Alright, so I made those adjustments. Anyways, solve these and I'll tell you. So if you do 235 divided by 60, you're going to end up with not quite as many as you would think. You end up with 3.91. Well look, that's not 4. So they're not going to let you have 4 private sessions, because you don't have enough for that full 4th private session. So yeah, it equals 3.91, whatever, but the key truth is you can't have 0.91 of a lesson. You're going to have to round down. You'll just have money left over. So you can get 3 lessons if you're doing the all-private option. Whereas if you do 235 divided by 45, for that you get 5.222, but you're not going to get 0.22 of a lesson. So again, you'll get 5 lessons, so you have 2 left over. So the question said, how many more semi-private than private would you get? Well, for semi-private, we just solved, and we said for semi-private, we can have 5, and for, for semi-private, you can have 5, and for completely private, meaning one-on-one, you can have 3. So it's 2 more. So you could afford 2 more semi-private than you could for just all the way private. Make sure you have some of this worked out. Feel free to write in a way that maybe makes a little more sense for you. Sorry for the confusion. But yes, this is how we work out this question. Alright, so we just have 2 sections left. Solving equations with a variable on both sides, and then solving multi-step equations. These are going to look very similar. And remember, the overall lifeguard perspective is you're going to simplify both sides. Now, in the next section, that's going to mean getting rid of parentheses by using the distributive property. In this section, you're not really going to have any examples where you have to get rid of any parentheses. Anyways, when you have a variable on both sides, you should start by moving your smaller variable towards the bigger one. Again, I said should. You don't necessarily have to. It's just usually the faster way to do it. Once you've done that, you'll just solve it like usual. You'll generally have a 2-step equation at that point. So let's do some examples. Try these first. Hit pause, try number 1, then see how you did. Okay, the answer number 1 is a equals -2. So if you already knew that a equals -2 and you have the steps, you can skip this next part. But if you're not quite sure why, make sure you have the steps. Stay tuned. So like I said to you earlier, you should start by moving your smaller variable towards your bigger variable. This will help you avoid a negative coefficient. Meaning, let's say you had done it like this. This is not the ideal way. I don't want you to write this. This isn't the way I'm going to recommend it. But let's say you had subtracted 7a from both sides. Well, on the right side, you'd have 2a minus 7a. That is negative 5a. You're not going to have a negative to have to deal with later, and it's one more thing to have to keep track of. That can get confusing, so I'm going to say don't do it that way. Let's move the smaller one towards the bigger one. The smaller one is positive 2a. The opposite of that is negative 2a, or minus 2a. So they cancel on the right side, So on the right side, there's nothing left on that equal sign, on that side of the equal sign. You're allowed to empty it. What number is nothing? 0. So there's a 0 over there. Now, on the left side, 7a minus 2a, well, that's 5a. So drop down the plus 10. Now look what you got here. You have yourself a two-step equation that you can solve from here, meaning get rid of the plus 10 and then get rid of the 5 for the same reasons that we talked about in this section in this video about solving two-step equations. So let's do that. Add 10 to both sides and we end up with 5a equals negative 10. Your last job is to get rid of that coefficient. To get rid of all coefficients, we divide. We have a positive divided by a negative. Negative divided by a positive. We end up with a equals negative 2. And that's our final answer to number 1. Take a moment, try number 2. Hit pause, try number 2. We end up with x equals 8 for number 2. So now stay tuned if you need to see how all those steps look. Start by moving your smaller variable towards your bigger one. Your smaller one is positive 8x. The opposite of that is negative or minus 8x. That's when you should move to avoid any negatives. Alright, so if you do that, on the right side you'll be left with 24. On the left side you'll have 11x minus 8x. Well, that's 3x. So you have 3x equals 24. Now look, you got lucky. You only have a one-step equation from this step forward. To get rid of all coefficients, you divide. So on the left side you have x. On the right side you have 8. So 24 divided by 3 is 8. 8 is the solution. Now, I'm going to do that thing that a lot of you don't take the time to do. If you're not sure if you have the right answer, or maybe you think you are sure, but you want to make extra sure, like on a test or a quiz, or even just for yourself in real life, check your answer. So if you think it's 8, plug in an 8 right there. Plug in an 8. Oops, I didn't mean to change pages. Plug in an 8 over here. Plug in an 8 on both of them. So, and then see if it's a true statement. So on the left side, 11 times 8. 11 times 8 is 88. So we have 88. So on the left side, we have 88. On the right side, if we plug in an 8 right here, we'll have 8 times 8. Well, that's 64. So we'll have 64 plus 24. Well, 64 plus 24. 20 plus 60 is 80. 4 plus 4 is 8. Okay, so 88. So we have 88 equals, use a calculator if that makes sense. 88 equals 88. Hey, that's a true statement. So most definitely, yes, you have the solution to this equation. It is 8. So keep that in mind. Plug in your answer. Notice I'm being kind of silly about this because this is the thing that people don't take the time to do, and it is literally that easy to know if you have the correct answer. Obviously, do it underneath. Don't do it on top of your problem with highlighter. On top of your problem with a highlighter like I did. All right, moving on. Try number 3. Hit pause and I'll reveal the answer. Then you can make sure you know how to do it. Hit pause. Yes, in case you hadn't noticed, it is getting a little late. I'm getting a little delirious, but we'll get through this thing. We'll get it posted. Start by moving your smaller variable towards your bigger variable. Again, you don't have to do this. It's just recommended. I do it for consistency, and I do it to avoid negative coefficients. All right, so your smaller one is positive 6y. The opposite of positive 6y is negative, so minus. And I'm going to say this one more time, hopefully. Anytime you move an entire term, like positive 6y, positive 17, negative 3. Notice I said I included the minus sign on that one because it was minus. That makes it negative 3. Or positive 8y. Anytime you move an entire term, those things I circled are called terms, you always do the opposite of what's currently in front of it, meaning add or subtract. If there is nothing in front of it, like this 8y, or there's nothing in front of this 6y, that means it's positive. So if it's positive, the opposite is a negative. So for our purposes, negative means subtract. That's why we're subtracting. So if you're not sure why, sometimes whether it's add or subtract, make sure you keep track of that so you know. By the way, I forgot to show you the answer for number 3. The answer number 3 is 10. And if you're not sure how to get that answer and show your work, watch these steps. So the answer is 10. Anyways, let's continue. On the left side, you have 8y minus 6y. That is 2y. Drop down the minus 3. Drop down the, not plus 17. That just means positive 17. The plus sign tells you positive. Now, if that had been a minus sign, yes, it would have been negative 17. Anyways, from here you have a two-step equation. This should start to look very easy from here. You should be able to do this. You end up with y equals 10. That is the answer number 3. And those are your steps of how you get there. Make sure you show your work. Number 4, press pause. Try this question. Then see how you did. Awkward if you haven't hit pause yet. The answer number 4 is p equals negative 3. If you don't have those steps or you don't have that answer, let's stay tuned. Alright, let's mute the mutant chicken method tells us. Feel free to watch that video for more explanation. It says to move the smaller one towards the bigger one. I keep writing minus, but it's a coincidence that each of the ones we're moving are positive already. If this had been a negative 4, I would be adding 4 to both sides. But since it's a positive 4, I'm doing the opposite, which is negative, so subtract 4 from p from both sides. So if we do that on the left side, 5p minus 4p, well, that's 1p. Drop down the plus 2, drop down. Oop, that's a negative 1. So now notice we only have 1p left. So our final step once we move this 2 to the other side is whatever that equals. We're going to divide both sides by 1 but to get rid of that coefficient. But the truth is, when you divide by 1, it doesn't really do anything. So you're going to notice I'm just going to pretend it wasn't there. I'm just literally ignoring it right now. So negative 1 minus 2 is negative 3. So I'm not even going to mention that 1. If you really wanted to do it, put the 1 there, divide both sides by 1, and you end up with p equals negative 3. In other words, it didn't do anything. So I'm just not going to do that. So p equals negative 3. That is your answer to number 4. Oh no, questions with fractions, number 5 and number 6. I think you'll survive. Bart and Lisa are going to figure these questions out, so can you. Do your best, at least hit pause and try number 5 and see how you did. Number 5, n equals 48. If you don't have that answer, you're not sure how to show all your steps neatly because maybe you're scared of fractions, I don't know, stay tuned, watch, see how you do it. Same thing as always, ignore the fractions. We're going to move the smaller variable towards the bigger variable. We have negative 1/6 n and positive 1/6 n. The smaller one is going to be the one that's negative, that's further to the left on the number line. The opposite of negative is add. Oh, so look, here's an example where you get to add to move it to the other side. So we're going to move in the entire term. So we're going to add 1/6 times n, 1/6 n. They cancel on the left side. On the left side, you're left with just 15. On the right side, 1/6 n plus 1/6 n, well, that's 2/6 n. Well, 2/6, that simplifies to 1/3. So we have 1/3 n minus 1. So we now have a two-step equation. We have to get rid of the minus 1, then get rid of the rational coefficient. Oh no, it's a fraction. But refer to your 2-1 skills on rational coefficients. You will be able to do it. So let's move that minus 1 first. So we add 1 to both sides of the equal sign. We're left with 16 equals 1/3 n. That is an ugly n. Now, that is still an ugly n. Nah, good enough. So now it's solving just like 2-1. So remember, to get rid of all coefficients, we divide. So we're going to divide both sides by 1/3. That's what we're doing here. They cancel on the right side. So on the right side, I'm going to have to move this over. We're left with n equals, let me draw a little arrow so you know I moved it. That arrow is in the wrong direction. Okay, so now we just have to remember how to divide by a fraction. So that's 16 over 1 turns into times, because we're dividing by a fraction, times and flip. So now, multiply straight across, and you will be done. 16 times 3, that is 48. So you have 48 over 1, which is just 48. I don't have room, so I'm just going to write 48. So 48 equals n. n equals 48. That is your final answer to this question. Feel free to plug it in to see if it's true. Okay, now hit pause and try number 6. Number 6 is b equals 18. So now stay tuned to see how to do that, or if you already have your steps shown, you can skip this next part. We should start by moving our smaller variable towards our bigger one. The smaller one is negative 2/9 b, so we're going to do the opposite, which is add 2/9 b to both sides. Now, when you do this, you'll notice, in order to do these, we got to add these coefficients together. They're not like denominators, so we're not ready to do it just yet. So that means you need to make those common denominators before you can do it. So we have 1 over 3 plus 2 over 9. So our common denominator is going to be a 9. So that means we have to multiply this by 3, this by 3. So we end up with 3 over 9 plus 2 over 9. That's what we're working with here. And so that's going to give us 5 over 9. That's what we're going to have. So this means on the right side, we're going to have 5 over 9 times b. Now look, we drop everything else down. We have to drop it down. You now have a two-step equation, so get it done. Get rid of minus 7 first, plus 7. We got 10 on the left side. On the right side, we have 5 over 9 times b. Now it's a rational coefficient question. Do the same thing we just did to finish. It's up to you whether you use the shortcut. I'm going to go ahead and use it. 5 goes into 5 once, 5 goes into 10 twice, so now you have much easier numbers. 2 times 9 is 18, 1 times 1 on the bottom is 1, so we just have 18. So b equals positive 18. That is your answer to number 6. Make sure you have the answers for this question and the last question. Make sure you have these steps written down. So before even trying this question, just make sure you do the full instruction. It says define a variable, write an equation, and solve. So just like what we were doing before, there are 3 things you need to do for this question. So press pause and think about it. Okay, so you can go ahead and let anything represent, you can use any letter you want. Since it's saying just 4 times the number, I'm going to be generic and just say, let x represent that number. That's me defining my variable. So now that we've done that, now let's go through and translate what it says. It says 9 fewer than, meaning something, whatever, we're going to take away 9. So at some point, we're taking away 9. That's what that tells us. It says half a number, okay? So it tells us we're going to take half a number, and we're going to do half a number and then take 9 away from that. So half a number, meaning we could say divided by 2, we could say x divided by 2, we could say half times x, we could say 0.5 times x. All these are different ways of saying the same thing. But since I know you're tired of fractions, I'll give you a break and we'll make it a decimal. So you're welcome to write this as 0.5 times x. Means the same thing as if you had said half times x, or x divided by 2. Your steps would just look slightly different, but it would still solve the same way. Anyways, it says is 5 more is, so is, it would be an indicator of an equal sign. 5 more than 4 times a number. 5 more than. That means we're going to do something and add 5. So you can either say 5 plus or something plus 5. The order you add things in does not matter. 4 times a number. Well, 4 times a number, the number, referring to the same number from before, is just going to be x. So 4 times x. So we have 0.5x minus 9 equals 5 plus 4x. Or you could say 4x plus 5. Means the same thing. Anyways, this is your equation. That's step 1. And what step 2 is defined. This was step 2 to write it. Now solve it. Move your smaller variable towards your bigger variable. Your smaller one is 0.5x. So subtract that from both sides. Cancel on the left side. And on the left side, you have just negative 9. Now on the right side, we have 5 plus 4 minus half is 3.5. So 3.5x. That is an ugly 5. Okay, so now this is the equation you're left with. So now subtract 5 from both sides and divide by 3.5, and you are done. Because 5 is furthest away, move that first. And as a tip, I'll tell you this. In all equations, pretty much every single time, the last thing you're going to do is get rid of the coefficient, the thing touching the x. Because if you start with what's furthest away, the thing that will always be the least furthest away is the thing that's touching it. So the coefficient will always be the last thing you move. Make sure negative 9 minus 5 means go deeper into the negative, so negative 14. Divide both sides by 3.5 and you're done. A negative divided by a positive is a negative. So now to find out what is 14 divided by 3.5. I believe that equals 4, but I'm going to double check. It's getting late. Same thing you should be doing during a test or a quiz. Don't assume and rush and get it wrong. The almighty calculator of slavery agrees it is 4. We know it's going to be positive. We know it's going to be negative, so it's negative 4 equals x. Alright, I got to slow down. I got to make sure it's getting late. I don't want to make any mistakes and confuse you guys. Alright, so x equals negative 4. When in doubt, plug in your answers and see if they're correct, and you're good. Alright, we have one more word problem, and then we're done with this section. Make sure you have these steps written down. Okay, number 8. Our job is, the last sentence tells us, for how many tickets is the cost for the members the same as the non-members? Meaning at what point is that crossing where you're really going to make your decision with who you're going to go with? We just need to find that equal point. You don't necessarily have to make a decision and be critical and use critical thinking. You mostly just need to figure out where are they equal. That's our job. Anyways, we're going to turn each of these situations into an equation. Now notice, if you're going to be a membership fee, you're only going to pay that fee once. That would make sense. So if you're going to pay the membership fee, it looks like it's $30 is what that's going to cost you. And it said the table shows ticket prices for the local. For how many tickets is the cost? Same. Okay, anyways. So if you're a member, you paid $30 to be a member, and you're only paying it once. So for people who are club members, we're going to do club members on the left, non-club on the right. So if you are a club member, you're going to pay $30. You're only paying it once, so you're not multiplying it by anything. It's just plus 30. It's plus 30 because it's going to add to your cost. Now, if you do that, you only pay $3 per ticket. $3 per ticket means $3 times the number of tickets you buy. And notice, I defined my variable just now by at the same time. T equals the number of tickets that you buy. And they said, for how many tickets are you looking for? So T represents what you're looking for, the number of tickets. Okay, so this is the club members. This is the expression for their costs. Now let's look at non-club members. People, I'm just going to call them nons. That's not an O. These are nons. These are non-club members. Notice, they do not have a membership fee. So there will be no plus 30. That will not be there because they don't pay it. But here's the trade-off. They pay more for each ticket. They're paying $6 per ticket. So $6 times the number of tickets. So their expression is going to be 6 times T. Our job now is, for how many tickets will their cost be the same? Meaning 5 tickets, 10 tickets. At what point will this total cost equal this total cost on the other side? That's what we're going to do. Here's your equation. Now solve it. By the way, I didn't tell you the answer. The answer is 10 tickets. If you did not know how to get that, stay tuned. Okay, start by moving your smaller variable towards your bigger one. So it should be that one. So if you do that, they cancel on the left side you have just 30. On the right side, 6t minus 3t, well, that's 3t. Now, finish by dividing both sides by your coefficient, and you are done. And you end up with t equals 10. And since t represented the number of tickets, you would say 10 tickets is how many that it would take for the cost to be the same for club members and non-club members. Notice, I used the question in the answer. That's how you answer fully. Moving on to the last section of our chapter, section 2-5, solving multi-step equations. Now, as your reminder, if you remember your notes, this is just a clip for your notes. You should not need to write this down. You should already have it. Or write it down again if that would help. Your objective was your steps, meaning I can solve multi-step equations because, now here are your steps. I will simplify both sides first with the distributive property, meaning simplify both sides, but to do that, you're first going to use the distributive property. And as a hint, the distributive property is how you get rid of parentheses. If you've got parentheses in your question, it's how you get rid of them if there's something touching them. Like if you had a 2 outside and you had whatever in the parentheses, you get rid of the parentheses by doing 2 times everything on the inside. That should be a reminder. Now, once you do that, step 2 is combine like terms, meaning anything that has the same letter with the same exponent. So, for example, 2x and 3x squared are not like terms because that other one has a squared on it. But if it was just 2x and 3x, yes, those are like terms because they have the same letter and the same exponent. Technically, it's a 1. So you could add those together, 2x plus 3x, well, that is 5x. So yes, you've combined like terms. And then we're going to solve from there with the properties of equality, meaning at that point, though, it's going to look exactly like the questions we did in 2-3, solving equations with the variable on both sides. I totally just said 2-3 and meant 2-4. Solving equations with the variable on both sides. All right, let's do some examples. Hit pause, try this question, see how you did. The answer number 1 is -9. K equals -9. If you got that answer and you showed your steps, you can skip this next part. If you did not, stay tuned. You need to have the work and the answer. And the understanding, of course. Alright, serious voice. Make sure we're clear. Before you do anything, simplify everything in your equation. That means, I just got done telling you, we got to get rid of these parentheses. We can't solve for K if K is surrounded by these parentheses and the 12 and that got sloppy. You've got to get rid of those things around it first. We did a prerequisite lesson before we even did this section, but this will be a reminder. To get rid of that parenthesis, we use what's called the distributive property, meaning you take what's on the outside and multiply it by everything on the inside. I'm going to show my work for that. So that's going to be negative, that's not a 12. So that's going to be -12 times K. And now, to know what goes here, we don't know, but there is a complicated way of saying it, but let's keep it simple. A negative times a positive, since it's -12 times +4. A negative times a positive is a negative. Because it's a negative, you put a minus sign here. If it had been a positive answer, there would have been a plus sign there. But we said it was negative. Meaning, let's say this was -4 in here. A negative times a negative is a positive, so we would say a plus sign since we said positive. That's not the case. So it's negative. It's a minus sign because a negative times a positive is a negative. Now, don't even worry about who's positive or negative. We already know what it's going to become. Just write 12 times 4. So now right below that, let's write what that actually equals. So that's negative 12k minus 48, or negative 48, whatever you want to call it. All that equals 60. Now take a look. Your job is to now combine like terms. That was the second step. However, in this example, we have no like terms on either side. So you're just going to solve it. In this case, it's a two-step equation. Sometimes, and for other questions, you're going to have another k over here. You have something else to deal with. That's not happening in this question, so we just go straight to solving it like a two-step equation. This should now be easy. Take your time, show your work. Divide both sides and you're done. Go all the way to the end, you have your answer, k equals negative 9. Remember, get in the habit of checking your answer. Plug in negative 9. Negative 9 plus 4 is negative 5. Negative 5 times negative 12. A negative times negative is a positive. 5 times 12 is 60. So positive 60 equals positive 60. Hey, that's a true statement, so that negative 9 is most definitely our solution. If at any point you get a false statement when you do this, you either did it wrong when checking your answer, or you have the wrong answer. Those are the only two possibilities. Try this question, press pause. Remember to use the distributive property to combine like terms as necessary, and then solve. If you do that, a will equal negative 14. Now, make sure you know why. If you already do, skip this next part. If you don't, watch. First thing we're going to do is go to these parentheses with the distributive property. So, on the left side, we're going to have 8 times 3a. And now for 8 times 6, it's positive times positive, so it's positive. 8, that looks like 8.8 times 6. Now I'm going to go right to the right side. 9 times 2a. Now for 9 times negative 4, that's a positive times negative. Well, that's a negative answer, so I'm going to put a minus sign. 9 times 4. Now I'll go ahead and simplify, just see what each of these are equal, and you'll be ready to move on. On the left side, 8 times 3 is 24, so we have 24a plus, that's an ugly a. 24a plus 48, since 8 times 6 is 48. 9 times 2a is 18a, and then 9 times 4 is 36, so minus 36. You now have an equation with a variable on both sides, so use the skills that you learned in 2-4. Move the smaller one towards the bigger one. So we subtract it, those cancel, and now finish from here. Preferably neither of what I'm doing. I'm going to slow down and write these neatly. You now have a two-step equation to finish. At this point in the game of Chapter 2, you should be able to quickly, automatically see how to do two-step equations. You don't have to know the answer, but at least know what the steps are going to be. You're going to subtract 48 from both sides, then you're going to divide by 6. You're going to go deeper into the negatives for these on the right side. Divide both sides by 6, and you're done. So your final answer is a equals negative 14. Make sure you have these steps. Moving on. Oh no! Fractions! Hit pause. At least try it. Check yourself. Alright, the scary fraction question. The answer is 6. H equals 6. If you do not have 6, you need to pay attention. If you do have 6, but you got an accident, or if you're not sure if you did it correctly, or you showed your work neatly, stay tuned. We're going to start by getting rid of all parentheses. So we've got a negative 4 right here, not a positive 4. That minus sign makes it a negative 4. We're going to distribute that to everything on the inside. So that means we're going to have negative 4 times 2/3. So if that helps, that's negative 4 over 1 times 2 over 3 each. Now, negative 4 times negative 3, it's a negative times a negative. That's a positive. So because of that, plus sign all the way. That's what we're going to do. And if it helps, I'll even point to that one with blue. So because of that one, that one's going to become positive. All right, so we're going to say 4 times 3 is what we're going to end up doing. So now, let's go ahead and just let's address the hard work now. Let's do 4 over 1 times 2 over 3. If you go straight across, you get 8 over 3. Now, for the sake of making this question easier, you'll notice you have other things that have coefficients over 3. So for that reason, let's leave it as negative 8 over 3 so that we do not have to worry about turning it into an improper fraction later. Let's leave it as an improper fraction for the time being until we're all the way done. Then our final answer will turn into a mixed number if necessary. Alright, so drop everything else down. At this stage, you want to go ahead and the second step was combine any like terms you have. Look at the right side. We have no like terms. This one has an H, the other one has nothing. Therefore, the only thing negative 6 could be a like term with is that, let's say we had like a plus 5 or a minus 5. That's the only thing it could be a like term with, a regular number like itself. On the left side, though, notice we do have like terms. We have two sets of h's, so we're ready to combine them. So we're going to do 1/3 h minus 8/3 h. Well, 1/3 minus 8/3, you already have a common denominator, so just look at the tops. 1 minus 8, that is negative 7. If you're not sure why, study your negative skills. So 1 minus 8 is negative 7. This is important. So here, I'm even going to color code this. These two items right here, you know you're subtracting because of what's in front of the second one. 1/3 minus 8/3, that's 1 minus 8. That is going to give us negative, that should be in black. It's going to give us negative 7 over 3, so negative 7/3 h. The plus 12 is still there. And now I'm just going to drop everything else down. We're now at the step where we have a variable on both sides. We've simplified both sides fully. Now we're just going to solve it like an equation that has the variable on both sides. So we're going to move the smaller variable towards the bigger variable. So we're going to add, because the smaller one is clearly the negative one, the opposite negative is positive. Positive means plus. So we're going to add 7/3 h to both sides. They'll cancel. Now, I'm going to show my next step, but first I'm going to erase this step right here because I need room. I'm going to erase and move everything up. So take a moment to write this down if you haven't done so already. So due to technical difficulties, I could not just slide it up simply, so I'm just putting it on a new page. So we're going to finish from here. Alright, so this is I believe this was number 3, the scary fraction question continued. So on the left side, we're left with just 12. On the right side, 2/3 h plus 7/3 h. 2/3 plus 7/3, well, that's, you keep the bottom and add the tops. That's 9/3. So 9/3 h minus 6. Oh, hey, what is 9/3? 9 over 3. What does 9 over 3 simplify to? It simplifies to 3 over 1. Well, hey, 3 over 1, that's just 3. So that's now 3h. Let's fix that. So this 9/3 right here is really just a 3. I'm going to change that. Alright, so we have 12 equals 3h minus 6. Well, hey, we now have a two-step equation. So to recap, we use the distributive property, we combine like terms, we've now moved our variables all to one side. Now we have a two-step equation. Every question will work like this, except you might get lucky and not have to do one of the steps because it won't be necessary. Alright, so solve from here. And you end up with h equals 6. Hopefully that's what I told you to begin with. Yes, h equals 6. So that is our answer. Feel free to plug it in and check it. For the sake of this video already being so long, I'm not gonna. Alright, so take your time, show your work, make sure you write down all of these steps. Let's move on. Alright, so try number 4. But actually, no, don't try number 4 because I'm already going to warn you. 4 and 5 are going to be special situations, and I want to make sure we understand what those are. I don't think we made them fully clear in class, so let's make sure we do. There are two special situations when solving equations. This is generally only going to happen when you have a variable on both sides. Here's what's going to happen. At some point when you're solving and you go to move your letters all to one side, what you're going to notice is all of your letters are going to cancel out. Meaning at some point we're going to move our C's to all to one side. What's going to happen is all of your C's, let's say something like this happened, let's say you subtract C from both sides, all of your C's will be canceled out. If that happens, if all of your variables cancel out and you are left with a true statement, I'm making this up, I don't know what's actually in this question. If you end up with 5 equals 5, that would be a true statement. If your letters cancel out and you're left with a true statement, what that means is no matter what you plug in for C, you're going to have a true statement. So any number is a solution. So if everything cancels out and you're left with a true statement, that means all numbers are solutions. You can say it's called an identity. That was a vocabulary word we called it in our notes from this section. It's called an identity. Or you can simply say all real numbers. Every number is a solution. All numbers. Now the opposite. Let's say you got to this, let's say the same thing. Your letters cancel out, but you were left with a false statement. If that happens, that means there is no solution, meaning there is no value for C that would make this equation true. So you would say no solution, or the fancy vocabulary, you could say a null set, an empty set, meaning the set of numbers that are the solution is none. So I would just say no solution. Let's keep it simple. That means there would be no solution that would ever make this equation true if your letters cancel out and you're left with a false statement. Now, anytime this happens, be skeptical. Take a moment to make sure, double check your steps. Feel free to plug in an experimental value and see if it confirms with what you found. Now, So I've already given away 4 and 5. That's what's going to happen in this part. Let's take our time and solve these. So if you try number 4, if you haven't done so already and you think you can do it, try it. You simplify both sides and try to solve down. And I'll give you a hint. Your letters are going to cancel out, but keep track of whether you have a true statement or a false statement, and that'll tell you. Alright, so the answer to this question is going to end up being all real numbers. It's an identity, meaning you're going to end up having all numbers are solution. And let's see why. If we use the distributive property on both sides, so 8 times c, for the sake of space, since I ran out of space last time, I'm going to skip writing this step. I'm just going to say what it is. 8 times c is 8c. Positive 8 times negative 9, well, that's a negative answer. 8 times 9 is 72, so minus 72, or equals 72. Now let's distribute over here. 6 times 2c. 6 times 2c is 12c. Positive 6 times negative 12. A positive times a negative is a negative, so minus sign. 6 times 12 is 72. So we have 12c minus 72. Drop down that minus 4c. Now you go on to step 2. Step 2 is combining like terms if possible. Our left side has no like terms. Our right side does. We have 12c and minus 4c. Notice I always include what's in front of the second one because that's what tells you how to combine them. So if we combine them, if we did 12c minus 4c, well, we're going to get 8c. So now I'm just going to drop everything else down. Now at this step, you might already start to notice something. Look at our equation. Our left side is our right side, meaning they're the same thing on both sides. So of course they're equal, meaning that's at this stage you might notice that, yeah, you probably are already going to have an identity, meaning the left side equals the right side, meaning everything's a solution. But if you're not sure why, keep going. Let's say you wanted to move this one. You can't tell which one's smaller because they're the exact same size. But look, those cancel. But now watch. Those on the left side also cancel. So you're left with negative 72 equals negative 72. Well, here's the good news. That's a true statement. So because your letters canceled out and you were left with a true statement, that means everything is a solution to this question. So you would say all real numbers, or just all numbers, or you could just use the word identity. It means the same thing. So this is the answer to number 4. The answer is everything is an answer to number 4. Try number 5. Hint, hint, it might be the opposite, but make sure you can show your steps. So for number 5, you're going to get no solution, or a null set, or an empty set, or there's nothing that will make this equation true for y. Let's understand why. Distribute the negative 3. I'm going to skip that step of writing the multiplying just for the sake of space. Negative 3 times 5y is negative 15y. Negative 3 times negative 7. A negative times a negative is a positive. 3 times 7 is 21, so plus 21. Now, drop down everything else, and then we'll continue. Once you drop everything down, your second step is to combine all like terms if possible. No like terms on the right side, but on the left. On the left side, no like terms, but on the right side, yes, we do have like terms. We have negative 15y and plus 5y. That plus the thing in front of the second one tells you how to combine them. So negative 15 plus 5. Well, that's going to be negative 10. So let's show that. So I'm literally going to write. I'll do it in color code so you see where it came from. Negative 10y. Now just drop everything else down. So now notice, your left side kind of looks like your right side, meaning they both have a negative 10y on them. But now look, one of them has an 18 here and the other one has a 21. Whereas in our last example, they both had negative 72 left over right there. So it was our clue that it was going to be the same. So here they're not quite the same. But if you go to solve, your y's are still going to cancel. Meaning if you were to move negative 10y to the other side, the opposite side is plus 10y or positive 10y. Now, on the left side, those cancel. On the right side, oh, they also cancel. And if you do that, you're left with 18 equals 21. That is a false statement. So that means no value for y will ever make this equation true. No solution. Okay, so now for these next few questions, make sure you carefully show your work and that you're neat and organized. Try each of them and then we can check our answers. Hit pause, try number 6. Alright, the answer number 6 is 62. T equals 62. So, if you do not have that, or if you don't quite have the right steps, make sure you watch this so you can see those right steps. Let's start by getting rid of all of our parentheses by distributing. 8 times t is 8t. 8 times positive 2, well, that t is terrible. 8 times positive 2 is positive 16, so plus 16. Now let's distribute this negative 3. Negative 3 times t is negative 3t. Negative 3 times negative 4, negative times negative is a positive, so plus 3 times 4 is 12. Let's keep going. Now on the right side, 6 times t, 6 times negative 7, so that's 6t minus, since it's positive times negative, 42. Now then drop down that plus 8. So now we've gotten rid of all of our parentheses. Now our job is to combine any like terms that we have. On the right side, like terms. 6t, there's nothing else over here that has a t, so 6t has no like terms. Negative 42, that's a regular old number. Plus 8, that's a regular old number. So hey, we have like terms right there. We're going to do negative 42 plus 8. That's what we're going to do. So negative 42 plus 8. Well, that means head towards 0. I mean, you're not going to be quite as negative. So let's drop everything down on the right side. 6t. Now on the left, finishing on the right side, negative 42 plus 8, that's what's going to go there. And that's going to give us a negative 34, or minus 34 in this case. Now, on the left side, let's combine all of our like terms over there as well. We have 8t and minus 3t. So 8t minus 3t, that's going to give us 5. That's a terrible 5. 5t. Now, finish combining your other like terms you also have over here. You have positive 16 and plus 12. Well, positive 16 plus 12, that's going to be a positive answer. That's going to give us 28. 16 plus 12 is 28. So we have 5t plus 28 equals 6t minus 34. Let me rewrite that a little bit neater. Okay, so now we have an equation with a variable on both sides. So now it should finish just like those others. Move your variables all to one side, and then you will have a 1 or 2 step equation. In this case, I think it'll be a 1, but you'll usually have a 2-step equation. In this case, it will end up being a 1-step equation, since getting rid of the coefficient of 1 isn't really necessary. We're just going to kind of ignore it, pretend it's not there. Alright, so add 34 to both sides, and you are done. Because the coefficient is a 1, that's why you're done. So on the right side, you have just t. And on the left side, you have 50, 62. You have 62, so t equals 62. That is the solution for number 6. Hit pause, try number 7, and then check your answer. The answer to number 7 is negative 6. X equals negative 6. Stay tuned if you need those steps, otherwise fast forward. But make sure you have the steps. Don't get lazy. Take a break if you need to. Learn from these questions. Go ahead and do the distributive property. Get rid of all those parentheses. Be careful with that. Check your notes and examples of the prior examples. We talked about the distributive property, and there you're good. Now combine like terms on both sides. The right side has no like terms, but the left side does. We have 20 and we have minus 5. We know what 20 minus 5 is. That's 15. So those like terms are going to combine to give us 15. Now drop everything else down. Move your smaller variable towards your bigger variable. And you're going to have 1x over there. So that means on the right side, 1x. Meaning, since it's our last x, we're going to end up ignoring that 1 anyways. But I'm going to write it there so you know why it was there. Alright, now just move the 21 to the other side. And in this example, you'll be done if you do that. 15 minus 21, well, that's negative 6. So you end up with x equals negative 6. That is your final answer to number 7. So let's finish these with a not quite as complicated one. You're going to distribute this. Oh, hit pause and try this one. I'm sorry. Alright, the answer to this question is x equals 5. X equals 5. Hit fast forward or watch it if you need to make sure you have these steps. Distribute. We got 12x minus 48. Drop everything else down. Plus 3, 15. Now, from here, combine like terms. We have like terms as in negative 48 plus 3. That's negative 45. So drop everything else down. Now look, in this example, you only have a 2-step equation. Knock it out. And you end up with x equals 5. Make sure you show your steps, make sure you're neat and organized, and you work your way through these questions. Let's do a couple word problems for this topic, and then we are done. But let's take our time, and truly I want to remind you, make sure you check your answers, make sure you have all the work shown, make sure you listen to the explanations if you need them for the questions that you need them, and make sure you are prepared. Take a moment to, wrong question. take a moment to go through this and see if you can figure out what you need to do. Hit pause and try it. At least give it a shot. At least think about it. And remember, you're looking for how much can student council spend per student on food if each of all those students receives a $3.50 gift. Hit pause. Alright, if you solve this, you'll find out they can spend $4.72 per student on food. Now, let's make sure we understand how they got that. If you have that answer and you already have some work shown, you figured it out, good, move on. Just make sure that you showed your work. Okay, so let's go step by step and show a way of how to do this. I'll already give you this hint if you haven't already done so. There's at least 2 ways to set this question up to begin with. I'm going to briefly show you both of them, and one of them pretty much becomes the other way, but it might help you understand it. So in this question it says they have budget $2,000. Well, I'm going to just stop there. That means no matter what they do, add it all together, they've only got $2,000. So whatever happens, it's got to equal $2,000. Well, honestly, they're allowed to have money left over, but we're not going to make it an inequality. We haven't gotten to those yet. Anyways, equals $2,000. Now, the cost to rent the park shelter, meaning they're only going to pay that cost once. So that park shelter, it's only going to happen once, so we're not going to multiply by anything, but it is going to increase our cost. That's $150. So it only happens once, so it's not being multiplied by anything. Okay, how much can the student council spend per student on food? Oh, I guess it would help if I define my variable. I'm going to say F equals amount for food per student. Amount of food per student. I'm sorry, amount of money for food per student. That's saying it awkward. So to keep it simple, I'm going to say food money per student. That's an easier way of saying it. Okay, so anyways, it says how much can they spend per student, meaning what is F, if each of those 225 students receives a gift. One way to describe this that I think might make a little bit of sense is they are getting food, so they're going to have the cost for the food per student, and every student is also going to get a $3.50 gift. Okay? Now, if you add those together, meaning food per student, gift per student, and then you multiply it by the number of students, okay, this right here would tell you, so let's make sure we understand what this means, food per student, gift per student, okay, so grand total, this is how much one student is going to cost at this picnic, okay? Now, multiply that by how many students you have, and that's grand total, how much every student is going to cost, not counting the shelter rental. Now, if that didn't make sense to you, you could have done it separately. And in fact, if you use the distributive property on this, it's going to turn into what I'm about to say. So let's say you did it separately. You're going to have to get food for 225 students. So you're going to have to take the food and the number of kids and multiply it by how much the food is going to cost per kid. You're also going to add to your cost because 225 of your kids are going to be costing you $3.50. Now, that shelter rental cost only happens once, so we don't multiply by anything for the same reason as before. All of that is got to equal $2,000, or another, technically not more than $2,000. So, but this other way of describing it that I just wrote, technically was found, you could have done by using the distributive property on that one, so you would have ended up doing it anyways, but it might make more sense for some of you. You might understand this way more for breaking those up, meaning 225 students times price of food per student, 225 students times price of gift per student. That might make more sense to you. So if you like that, you can start either way. I don't care which way you start it, just make sure you label. Maybe it'll help you to label where each piece came from. Anyways, solve for F. So in this case, I already got rid of all the parentheses. Well, technically this parenthesis, that just means times. So you're going to multiply that together, and then you'll move everything away. So find out what it's going to cost for gift grand total for all the kids. That's $787.50. Let's go ahead and add that to the $150 now, because since those are like terms, then we'll be able to move them to the other side. Alright, so you've combined all your like terms. So now you just need to subtract 937 from both sides, and then divide both sides by 225. Now just divide both sides by 225, and you're done. I had to move it to another slide so I'd have room to finish. So divide both sides and you're all good. And you'll end up with F equals 4.72222 repeating. We're talking money, so round to the nearest penny. So we're going to say F equals $4.72. So that is how much money per student that they can afford to spend for this picnic at the shelter. Make sure you have all the work shown. We have finally arrived. We have finally arrived at the last question. If you've had to watch how to do all these questions, obviously that means you had a lot of questions, you weren't very sure. Hopefully you've gotten a lot of help from this video. So let's finish strong. Let's check this answer. Remember, you only need to watch the explanations for the questions that you got wrong or did not understand. Alright, so if you have not done so already, hit pause and try this question, and I will at least give you the answer to part B. Actually, I'll first give you the equation for part A so you can check yourself. Press pause and try it. Okay, so it says the table shows the number of students in each homeroom. I noticed that you might not be able to see this very well, so I'm going to go ahead and rewrite that real fast. Alright, so hopefully that helps see a little bit better in the video, where I just kind of rewrote each of those a little bit bigger. Anyways, it says write an equation to find the number of students in Mr. Boggs' homeroom if the total number of students is 90. Meaning, you're literally going to take all of these, add them together, and say equals 90. You don't actually have to do any work. Don't combine like terms. Don't do any of that. Just write all those things plus each other equals 90. So this would be your equation if you were just to list the expression for each of those classes, write plus in between all of them, and you say they all equal 90. So now your job is solve it, and if you solve it, you'll get B. And the question says, solve the equation from part A to find the number of students in Mr. Boggs' homeroom. Here's the good news. If you solve for B, if you look in your chart, B is Mr. Boggs' homeroom. So once you solve for B, you're done. That is your answer. So let's solve that equation. Oops, sorry about that. In order to do that, we're going to combine like terms first. But before we can even do that, we have to distribute this 1.5 right there. There's nothing to distribute in front of this one unless it's a positive 1. But if you distribute a positive 1, it's not going to do anything. So honestly, we're just going to drop those parentheses. So let's rewrite what we have. We have B plus 1.5 times B. Well, that's just 1.5B. 1.5 times 2, well, that's 3. Positive, so plus sign. So now I'm just going to drop everything else down. Now, go through and combine all of your like terms. B plus 1.5B plus 2B. Combine all of those. Well, let's do the easy ones first. Remember, that's like saying 1B out there. 1B plus 2B, well, that's 3B. 3B plus 1.5B, well, that's 4.5B. So we have a grand total of 4.5 times B. Now, combine your like terms with your constant numbers. 3 plus 15 minus 9. Well, 3 plus 15 is 18. 18 minus 9 is 9, but we're still at positive 9, so that means plus 9 as we said positive. So 4.5b plus 9. All of that equals 90. Technically, if you had this, you could have written this as your equation for part A. It's up to you if you want to simplify it right away, or you didn't have to. Well, look. You now have a two-step equation. Knock this thing out, and you're done. Divide both sides, and you're good. B ends up equaling 18, so you would say there are 18, since B was Mr. Boggs' homeroom, and that was what the question was asking, you would say there are 18 students in Mr. Boggs' homeroom. Alright guys, you made it through. You've seen the every question, or maybe you went out of order a little bit. Make sure that you show your work for every single question. If you have a question, if you're confused about one of the questions, watch that part of the video. Alright, make sure you study, make sure you practice. If you still feel you have weaknesses, do additional practice problems for those topics that are similar, maybe from your practice assignments or from your textbook. Make sure you check your answers. Take care, study, and you'll be ready for Chapter 2 to be all done. Take care, guys.